Bonjour à tous. Je m'appelle Josiane Ménard, je suis attachée de presse à la Banque du Canada et je serai la modératrice de cette conférence de presse. Le gouverneur Poloz va répondre à vos questions pour une période d'environ 20 minutes. Avant de poser vos questions, je vous demanderai s'il vous plaît de vous identifier. Comme nous diffusons la conférence de presse sur le web, je vous demanderai sérieusement d'utiliser les micros qui sont de chaque côté. On vous demande de vous limiter à une question et une relance pour le premier tour. Si on a le temps, on fera une deuxième ronde. Le gouverneur se fera évidemment un plaisir de répondre à vos questions dans la langue de votre choix. So before asking a question, please state your name and affiliation, and please use the wireless microphones because we are webcasting this press conference. Feel free to ask your questions in the language of your choice. So we're ready. Allison.
Yes, Allison Lampert with Reuters. One of the points you have said the bank is considering is wage growth. Do the recent strong job numbers for October mean that measure is picking up speed?
Well, it's a little bit early to say. It was an encouraging set of numbers, but the trend line for wages has been quite low, and the fact that we've got a perk up in the last data point is encouraging, and you never know when it's the beginning of an uptrend. But we'll need more data points to be assured of that.
A follow-up? Mr. Roberts?
Oil prices have been going up. Some suggest that they're going to go to triple digits. I wanted to get what your outlook is on that, and also what impact do you think it will have on the Canadian economy and how quickly?
Well, first of all, we don't forecast oil prices, basically because it's too difficult. So when we do our forecast, which we just presented a week ago, it assumes a constant oil price at around the average of the latest set of numbers. And that's just because there are so many competing hypotheses, and indeed a little bit of politics can cause quite a change in oil prices. So I think you know well how it interacts with the economy. Of course, exhaustively analyzed in our MPRs of 2014, well, mostly 2015, I guess. January 2015 was the most complete analysis, and that's exactly the same framework that we would use if oil prices went up significantly. But just one last point on that is that, as often the case, people underestimate just how flexible the oil market has become. That, in fact, it's very quick supply response, especially from U.S. suppliers, and so that's, of course, what caused oil prices to fall in the first place, and it's a sort of activity which would normally cap out a big rise because supply can come on stream much faster than in the past. It's better technology, just a much more elastic supply curve for oil.
Just to follow up, you talked about inflation. So do you have concerns that oil prices will affect the inflation or your target?
Well, oil prices translate into fuel prices for all of us, and so they directly and immediately, usually, have an impact on measured inflation. But when you need to think about the term inflation. So when one price goes up, it translates into inflation right away, and for 12 months, it feeds into the inflation numbers, and then 12 months later, it's not inflation anymore because the price is just up and it stays up. Understand? That's the difference between inflation and prices. So that's why the central bank tends to look through such increases in inflation, because they will prove to be temporary whenever prices retreat or just stay where they are. And that's exactly why it's a hard job, as I was discussing in the speech. Oil prices can move today and affect inflation between now and 1 year from now, but we've been targeting inflation for this coming year for the past 18 months, right? So we're always targeting 18 months to 2 years in the future, and in between, energy prices can go up or go down and change where inflation actually lands. But we'll see through that into what the actual underlying trend is, and that's the thing which is driving policy.
De l'autre côté, à l'autre micro.
Yeah, my name is Irene Rutema, so I'm a freelance political analyst. So my question, I ask it in English. You feel free to answer it in English or French. So my question is, with the NAFTA negotiations, are you worried that if the Trump administration decides to get rid or to to end the agreement, what will be the economic consequences on Canada economy? Are you worried about that? Thank you.
So, economists had a lot of trouble predicting the effects of NAFTA when it was put in. And so the same kinds of analysis, the same kinds of models would be used today to try to analyze a change, an important change to NAFTA. And it wouldn't be a clear-cut analysis. So that's the important thing to bear in mind. So we are not analyzing this in any detail at this stage, just making sure that we understand the linkages that would be operating. And we outlined them in the January MPR in a box, explained what linkages would be and how the effects would work their way through the economy. But I think the most important channel, and one which we have incorporated in our forecast, is the channel where the uncertainty around NAFTA can affect companies' investment decisions. Because it's that extra uncertainty which makes you hesitate about how much to invest in your plant or your equipment, and whether you still invest in Canada or the United States or Mexico, especially for companies already with operations in all three places. And so it's in our forecast there is we know that from our surveys, even though investment intentions are higher, they're not as high as they would be without the uncertainty due to NAFTA, because people are all talking to us about that uncertainty. And so we have introduced a negative judgment in our forecast for investment in Canada, which is embedded in our monetary policy report from last week. There's a footnote that deals with this issue. And that's, I think, the most important channel that will influence the economy if there's something more significant happens to NAFTA.
Theo?
Good afternoon, Governor. Theo Argydas, Bloomberg News. I don't know if I've read too much into the speech, but you seem to be telling Canadians not to get too complacent about low inflation. Are you in any way worried about inflation expectations being too low?
Well, as a central banker, you always concern yourself with that the longer that inflation spends time below your target, or above for that matter, different from target, the greater the risk that expectations will gravitate towards the actual experience instead of to the target itself. And so we call that de-anchoring. And we have no evidence at this time of any of that. All of our surveys suggest a very strong anchoring on 2%. And I think probably it has to do with how careful we've been to explain to people why a reading of inflation has been distorted one way or the other. So they're able to say, oh yeah, so I think the true underlying trend in inflation is around this number, not the number I see, and I understand why. And I think going to that extra effort to dig a little is the term I used in the speech, because if you think that there's a problem or if the models that we use are not doing a good job, all you need to do is dig a little bit to figure out, well, of course the model can't explain that. So when you add it back in, the model's actually doing its usual good job.
The other question I had, and obviously you might not see a problem here since you don't think inflation expectations are de-anchored, but given inflation has been so low for so long, if you really wanted to get inflation up, or I guess you're not worried about inflation expectations, so it might not be a problem, but the idea of running inflation above 2% or telling people that you plan to run inflation above 2%, to get inflation above 2%, to help you get inflation above 2%. Is that something that you've ever thought about doing?
Well, it's an issue that we think about, but of course a bridge that we don't need to cross when we're still trying to get inflation up to target. And I think it's important just to circle back to my previous answer, because if inflation is below target because of what we consider to be good disinflation, so certain things in your consumer basket just cost less to buy because they're electronic equipment or cars or whatever these things are, because of new efficiencies in the economy or just more competition. For example, the food story is less expensive because of increased competition. Well, it would be curious indeed for a central bank to try to pump up inflation in other parts of the economy to somehow offset good disinflation in other parts. And so I think, you know what, that's exactly why the explanation restores your faith in the underlying trend, and I think that's why expectations have remained well anchored. And frankly, the shortfall from target has been pretty modest. It's well within the band, so people still think 2% is the right number.
Thank you. À vous.
Bonjour, Olivier Robichaud, je suis avec le HuffPost Québec. J'ai une question qui sort peut-être un petit peu de vos habitudes sur la ligne rose qui est proposée par la mairesse de Montréal. Pour avoir du financement de la part d'Ottawa, on s'attend à avoir des investisseurs privés. Est-ce que vous pensez que ce genre de projet-là peut avoir un intérêt pour des investisseurs privés?
La ligne rose, la ligne de métro.
Oh my God.
OK. J'ai manqué, si je m'excuse. J'ai pas de commentaire spécifique sur un projet comme ça. Mais juste dans le sens plus général, ces investissements en infrastructure, c'est certainement le cas que partout au Canada, nous avons les besoins d'infrastructure. L'infrastructure, les investissements comme ça, ils donnent des bénéfices, des retombées constamment dans le futur. Et ça pourrait ajouter à notre ligne de tendance là, pour le potentiel pour l'économie. Alors moi, je suis content de voir les projets d'infrastructure, mais j'ai pas de commentaires sur un projet spécifique.
Madame Barry.
Bonjour, Hélène Barry avec la presse. Vous en avez parlé un peu dans votre discours du marché de l'emploi. Est-ce que vous pensez que les chiffres officiels donnent un portrait enjolivé de la réalité, c'est-à-dire que la réalité est moins belle que ce que les chiffres disent, c'est-à-dire qu'on parle de pénurie d'emploi, en regardant ces chiffres, on parle de pénurie d'emploi, de plein emploi. Est-ce que vous pensez que la situation du marché du travail est moins bonne que ce que les chiffres disent?
Oui, nous étions clairs avec ça dans le RPM. C'est-à-dire que le taux de chômage, comme publié, c'est le même niveau, presque exactement le même niveau qui descend en 2007. Mais si, par exemple, vous êtes une jeune personne découragée, quelqu'un qui veut entrer dans le marché du travail, mais quand tu es téléphoné, vous dites non, je suis pas participant dans le marché du travail. En fait, je suis découragé. J'ai essayé, j'ai beau essayer, j'ai pas d'emploi. Alors, vous n'êtes pas partie du dénominateur et certainement pas le numérateur. Alors, c'est perdu. Alors, c'est une espèce de distorsion, en effet. Ça manque quelque chose. C'est pourquoi la banque a développé cet indicateur alternatif. Ça, c'est le Labor Market Indicator. C'est dans le graphique, dans les RPM. Et c'est un niveau autour de 1 point de pourcentage plus élevé que durant l'année 2007. Et il y a juste des divergences périodiques, mais habituellement, sont exactement les mêmes. Mais pour le moment, c'est une divergence d'environ 1 point de pourcentage. Et ça incorpore ces autres effets. Et c'est pourquoi, c'est juste une statistique sommaire qui dit que oui, il y a d'offres excédentaires dans le marché de l'emploi et il faut l'utiliser avant de finir ce processus de convergence home.
De plus qu'il l'est.
Bien, en effet, il y a le taux de chômage réel, c'est plus élevé, mais c'est juste parce qu'il y a des effets plus long terme qui sont pas encore capturés dans ces statistiques. Et c'est pas à dire qu'habituellement, la statistique normale est problématique. C'est une bonne statistique au moyen, là. Mais pour le moment, on pense qu'il y a de l'offre excédentaire dans le marché et on va regarder très soigneusement les développements. Okay.
À vous.
Oui, bonjour. Alors, c'est Francis Alain du Journal de Montréal. Bonjour. J'avais une petite question. Dans vos fonctions à la Banque du Canada, c'est de veiller au système financier avec d'autres organismes, au bon fonctionnement. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez des Canadiens qui utilisent des abris fiscaux, qui mettent leur argent dans des abris fiscaux? Il me semble que c'est une donnée qui est assez importante dans vos calculs stratégiques. Donc, que pensez-vous de ces Canadiens-là qui utilisent l'évitement fiscal pour mettre de l'argent à l'étranger, à l'abri de l'impôt? En quoi ça influence votre politique à la Banque du Canada?
Mais c'est une question hors de notre mandat, notre expertise. Là. C'est une question pour quelqu'un d'autre, mais pas pour moi. Je m'excuse. Pardon?
Gouverneur de la Banque du Canada, qu'est-ce que vous en pensez de ces Canadiens-là?
Je ne veux pas vous donner une opinion personnelle concernant ça.
Vous ne vous prononcez pas sur les Canadiens qui utilisent des abris fiscaux, donc vous ne vous prononcez pas là-dessus.
Je pense que c'est ça.
C'est ça.
Parfait, merci.
Merci. Kevin?
Hi, Kevin Carmichael from Maclean's. Like Theo, I want to make sure I'm not reading too much into your remarks today, but listening to them, I'm left with the impression that the central bank would be comfortable if the inflation rate drifted past 2% and started to approach 3%, just as you're comfortable now with, or relatively comfortable with inflation now that's below the midpoint. Is that a correct reading?
So it is. If that's the way you put it is exactly right. Our intention is always to aim for 2%, and as I said, doing that right now, where our forecast is that about around a year from now we'd be at 2%, but we actually are forecasting inflation for the following year, and we want to make sure the fundamentals are lined up to be consistent with an inflation rate of 2%. Then. But what happens between now and then is something happens and it goes one way or the other. So we're totally symmetric about it, and I think that's an important thing, and that's why we have a band, because things can happen, either direction between now and then. So even though we'd still be aiming at 2, it would be, it would have to be the tendance, the actual trend in inflation would have to be heading above 2 by our forecast for that to be an issue for policy.
And as a follow-up, and perhaps to get some more clarification, just how the central bank does view the midpoint, would governing council consciously aim a little high if there was a good reason to do so?
It's a difficult question to answer, but I think to put it as bluntly as I can is just about what I just said, is that our intention is always to aim for 2%, because that's our target. And the credibility that we've built up over the years hinges on that. And being able to explain, if we miss it, why we missed it. And it wouldn't be a very good explanation to say, well, we missed it on purpose. I don't think it would be a very valid explanation. So I think that I realize, of course, there are other academic contributions to the literature that suggest things like that. So we're aware of that literature, and it's the sort of subject that we would consider in the process of our next evaluation of the agreement that we have. It's a sort of price level targeting that's at work there. If you've been below target for a time, wouldn't it be better to have it above target for a time to reinforce the 2% by making the level move? And I'm familiar with the argument. We haven't made that argument. We continue to aim at 2%, but we're open to that new literature to discuss over the next 4 years as we come up to our next renewal.
Merci. On va terminer avec M. Desrosiers.
Bonjour, Éric Desrosiers du Devoir. Les États-Unis auront un nouveau gouverneur à la Fed. Il semble qu'un des critères qui a amené son choix, c'est qu'il est ouvert à un certain assouplissement des règles financières. Avez-vous l'impression qu'au Canada, il serait temps de réexaminer les règles financières qui ont été, pour le secteur financier, qui ont été adoptées suite à la crise, et qu'il y aurait lieu en effet de les assouplir?
Mais on verra. Mais il y a une distinction importante à faire là. C'est qu'il y a un accord international concernant les principes, mais pas les détails de la régulation des institutions financières. Alors, c'est l'implémentation qui peut différer d'un pays à un autre. Alors, nous avons un régime ici au Canada et ça fonctionne très bien. Et ça observe l'esprit et les détails de cet accord. Mais c'est possible d'avoir les politiques légèrement différentes sous le même parapluie de cet accord. Alors, je n'ai pas de commentaire spécifique au niveau de ces plans pour les États-Unis. C'est une question pour eux et je n'aurai pas de commentaire sur leur décision. Jamais.
C'est pour ça que je vous posais la question sur le Canada. Avez-vous l'impression qu'au Canada, il y aurait lieu d'apporter des aménagements, des changements?
Bien, pour le moment, comme j'ai dit, on verra. S'il y a des changements au niveau international, ce serait une question pour OSFI à considérer en leur implémentation de ces principes. S'il y a besoin de petits ajustements ou n'importe quoi, nous sommes, dans un sens global, toutes les banques centrales et les autorités réglementaires, là, ils sont en espace de considérant les implications et peut-être proposer les petits ajustements pour un espèce de fine-tuning et c'est quelque chose de collaboratif partout en Basel. À Basel. Alors, pour le moment, j'ai pas de plainte, j'ai pas de visibilité des changements qui sont en tête. OK, merci.
Merci à tous d'être venus. Bonne journée.
Merci.